Hello and welcome to the Meeple Mentor YouTube channel. I'm Jared and with me is Holly. And today we are taking a look at the upcoming Kickstarter game Soulshards Grand Tourney. This is currently being funded on Kickstarter and it is from Grinning Demon Games. It is a role-playing game where you have a character and slowly building up their skills and items and weapons and even mercenaries to attend with them, and even conquering monsters in arenas and chasing them down as you build up, essentially your strength and prowess to be ready to fight in the Grand Tourney at the end of 2 weeks. And so essentially 14 days or 14 rounds of worker placement before the Grand Tourney happens, where all players will fight each other to the death. And so if you've got like 4 players, 2 are paired up against each other, and then the winner of those fight each other for one grand winner of the tournament. So, but the majority of the game is done through playing on a board where there's you've got your main character, and then you can recruit eventually some mercenary people, which gives you additional pawns to use on the board to collect more resources or cards faster. The game plays in a couple hours. I would say it's at least 3 hours long, depending on how many players. One of the things that this game has is the monster cards that are in the arena, which is a section on the board. They can escape and go to various zones, and there's like 11 or there's 10 zones. When a monster escapes, you then have to, fight them if you go to that zone, or if you've left a character there, they will automatically start fighting. So there's a lot of combat, even though the end of the game triggers combat as well, and that's just based on player against player. But throughout the game, you're going to be fighting monsters. There's a stack of monster like placards that give like a kind of a story about what the monster is and their background, and then crucially the other side, which is where you find all their stats. And this is it's kind of a attempt at making an Ameritrash game more Euro in a sense, if you're using those kinds of terms, where you're doing a lot of dice rolling, you're doing different skill checks against 3 different types of skills, and your starting character that you choose will have 1, 2, or 3 skill points in might, finesse, or wit, and those 3 things can tend to prioritize your ability in different kinds of ways, like melee attacks or ranged attacks or magic and spells. So as you gain more cards that are specific to those traits, you get to roll more dice. Basically, however much skill points you have is how many dice you get to roll, up to 4. So your skill maxes out at 4 for any given trait. And usually when you make an attack, there's like a defense trait that whoever you're targeting rolls, or not rolls, but is targeting that particular defense. So it's going to be like 7, 8, 9, or 10 to get damage through, or to get the attack to have triggered. With the same thing goes with the monsters. They have their own set of skills, which basically determines their defense and how many dice a given player rolls when they play as the monster against you. So usually you want to have someone not in the battle to control the monster when you're fighting one. So one of the things that happens, there's a lot of the combat is kind of its own thing, right? There's like initiative that takes place where you choose 2 cards from your standard 6-card hand, which is basically how you control what your character is going to do. But all your face-up cards and abilities on your board are triggerable by a number of these 6 cards, and you only get them back when you play a focus card to pull them back to your hand. So you're strategically trying to say, which 2 am I going to play this round, and how high is my priority number on those cards to be able to effectively do the damage I want to do, or maybe cause some status effect to affect your opponent before they get a turn to act. One of the ways that it addresses priority for the monsters There's a die that's rolled after you've selected your 2 cards, and then that determines which action they take. So there's like a pool of like 3 to 6 actions or so on a monster. If you want to know what a monster is going to do before you choose your cards, there is a way to do it by sacrificing any accuracy benefit that you would gain. So since it's all dictated by dice rolls, if you roll a 9 or higher and qualify to do damage, then you get a +1 on your attack. But if you want to say, well, maybe this round I'm going to sacrifice any potential bonus +1 so I can see what the monster is going to be doing first, you can do that. There are multiple players that can engage a single monster at the same time, so there's some additional rules on how that works. But essentially, most of the time, we found that you're going to be fighting monsters solo. And you kind of have to decide, is it worth it to sacrifice my free bonus point to see what they're going to do? I found that it wasn't. I found that it was probably best to just keep hitting it as hard as I can every time, because a dice roll is simply a dice roll.
I don't think I did it either.
Like, it's just one of those games where there's not a lot of ways to mitigate the dice rolls. Like, you have to really get the right cards or the right dice rolls and skill sets to be in the right place at the right time to make use of a lot of the things that you collect. It doesn't have a very streamlined or at least easy to use dice mitigation. There is a mechanism in the game where you can spend 2 fame to re-roll a die, but
forgot about that too.
We found that gaining fame was really difficult to get. It's like one of the stats that you're going to track throughout the game, and it impacts quite a bit. For example, you need 3 fame to unlock the ability to recruit a mercenary, and then like a certain more, like 6 and then 9, to get 2 or 3 mercenaries. It also affects your priority when you're looking at other players, especially involving in combat with a monster. It affects, so fame is important, and if you spend it, which is so hard to get, it's just one reroll. Like, it doesn't let you turn the die to a number you want. It's just a reroll. So that was, I think, a little bit difficult, and there were a lot of things like that were a little challenging to overcome, and mostly because you're relying on a lot of randomness, whether it be in the display of cards that come out or the just your dice against combat monsters. So the worker placement phases of a round, essentially you go around and place your guy on one of the 10 zones, but you don't take any of those actions until everybody's placed all their characters. Once those are placed, then you trigger the effects of the zones in zone order, so they're numbered, and anyone in that zone will then get those abilities in their own turn order as well. So there's a lot of like turn order within system, and you're constantly looking at priority versus, like everybody else versus combat versus dice rolls. There's a lot of numbers, and I felt like it got a little overwhelming trying to keep all of this straight in my head as I was trying to make plans, because most of my plans end up, failing because I didn't have what I needed at the time, or the draw wasn't good, or I just kept rolling low numbers and I didn't have enough to really offset that. So it really extends the length of the game almost unnecessarily. There is fun to be had in this game. I just found that it was a little bit complicated in terms of how many systems are being used in this. I liken it to how D&D has quite a few different like classes and stats that you're always tracking, but that's over the course of like days of different playthroughs of hours upon hours, because you're telling your own story. Whereas in a game like this, you're taking the same systems and basically allocating it over one course of like a 4-hour play, which means that you're less invested in who the character is and who the enemies are, and more about how fast can I get good equipment and how fast can I, defeat monsters to get those benefits, because
Both of which are very difficult.
they're very difficult, and every combat with monsters is going to take like 10 minutes. I mean, it's a lot of back and forth. There's no retreating. There's no, hey, like it's to the death every combat. So you're going to go round after round with a monster until either you've exhausted your health, which is usually at like 15, or the monster's dead, which can be anywhere as well up to 15, but they've got their own passive abilities, just like you've got abilities, such as like against most attacks, this one monster will say, well, -2 incoming attack for, gear. And I'm like, great, because now my really strong spear is crippled. So we're, again, increasing the length of time for this combat to resolve.
It's not that you can't defeat the monsters. It's that it feels punishing trying to.
Yeah. Even a rank 1, 2, or 3 takes a long time to fight. And sure, you might win, but now, your health is like...
You're almost dead.
Almost dead.
And then you have to stay where you are if the monster happened upon you, and that's how you're fighting it. And you can't go to the end and heal. I feel like there's a lot of taking 2 turns to do one thing. And I feel like there's a lot of... to me, with the dice rolls and the +1s and I can't even remember what the stats are called.
Might, finesse, and wit.
Yeah, and that you have to do +1 to finesse or -3 to accuracy. It feels like someone, that the intent was D&D with worker placement and deck building.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And I to me, that feels a little too much.
Yeah. And I don't think it's just you. Like, I also felt very overwhelmed by all the different systems in play here. Because so much of it, you're doing all these different things that other games would just do like one thing and then supplement it with like other minor stuff that doesn't impact. But everything you do here is important, and every decision you make is going to depend, like it's going to affect how strong you get, how quickly you do something. And you don't even automatically like get your worker back. You have to decide if you want to leave them there for the chance that one of the escaping monsters might go to your spot. And that can be really tricky. It's great if they come to you, because then you get some automatic benefit of like getting some fame from defeating them when they're escaping, which is nice. But to plan for that is hard unless you're what's called the first actor, which is like player 1, and you get to roll for where the monster goes, and then you could choose to just place it where you left your character. But there's just so much unknowns and like things that you hope happen that may never happen, and you just don't know quite how to plan your turn that way when you really only start with one worker, your character, and he goes somewhere, and then that's all you get to do.
I respect and admire the goal here, what they're trying to do. I do, and I like the idea. But I feel maybe it's too much. Because so you feel like, this is how I felt. I felt like I got stagnated, that I couldn't get to the places I wanted to try and get stronger because we got halfway through the game. I was sitting there and I was thinking, I'm never going to make it, and I still didn't have a ton of items, like it seemed like it was too hard to get what you needed to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I like the idea behind it, and I feel, I don't know,
maybe it could use a little more time and
some tweaking
to make it a little more streamlined, and maybe cut out 1 or 2 of these mechanisms that, either make the game slower or make the game more complicated. I think it would do better with removing some of those systems, or even the skill system. Like if there was a better way to like adjust your dice rolls, that might be a thing.
Because combat, you enjoy it at first. I enjoyed it at first, but then it ended up feeling grueling, and I was like, well, this is taking forever, and I've forgotten what my goal is over here to eventually fight the other player.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I don't know, it seemed overwhelming and daunting.
Yeah. If you've played, for example, the Dark Souls board game, that game it's different than this, certainly, but it reminded me of that in that the Dark Souls combat in that game was like very complicated, and there's a lot of moving that happens, and then this upkeep happens, and then like they rotate, and then there's defenses, and then there's rolls, and then there's that kind of stuff. So imagine that kind of combat without the movement, and it's just the rolling and the numbers. But then on top of that, you're also taking these worker phase turns and collecting cards and trying to buy things, or trying to just spend a turn to collect resources to then buy things later. And it adds basically like two different games into one really beefy and really messy RPG experience.
Feels like a super game. It's like, I said this earlier, and I don't mean any malintent by this. It's just what occurred to me. It feels like they sat down and they wanted to make the last game you would ever need to play because it has everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. It has so much that we were constantly referencing the rule book to make sure we were doing things in order, doing things right, making sure we didn't miss a step on a lot of different phases.
Still missed some things. And for instance, there's the terminology. I'm not a fan of some of the terminology either, because the terms they use for like your entire fight is considered a fight, but the turns within it are considered a round. And to me, a round is meaning it's applicable to the whole fight, because that's usually how it is. Rounds are series of turns.
Yeah.
And that's not how it is in here. So I got really confused on how long does this hold effect and that type of thing.
There was one other thing too, or another issue where usually you're rolling dice, and as long as one of the dice is like a 6 or higher, or even a 9 or higher, you're success. But then there's other actions that'll say, well, depending on how many successes you have, you get different benefits. And so to split that between, sometimes it's just rolling one number that you need out of 3, and then other times it's every success you get. And so keeping that distinction different from what you might expect, a D&D kind of game to have.
Yes, that I was gonna, and touching on that, it's very confusing because of the way that it is so much like D&D, but your multiple successes are not multiple successes. It's just, yeah, you got it. It's not, that's really difficult for me to differentiate because I played D&D for so long.
I think that could be one tweak right there. Like if you are able to roll multiple dice and you roll multiple successes. Oh my gosh,
that would like cut down combat so much. Yeah,
multiple times.
That'd be great because those monsters hit you hard.
That would be a lot faster and more
and you hit them for nothing. It seems like it's
like I hit it for 3 and it blocks 2. Cool. All right.
Yeah, and then he turns around and hits you for 6, and it's like what?
And there's the ways that you can block. You have to get equipment that lets you block, but every piece of equipment,
costs souls, which you have to get from a different action, which you can't move from. You
get 2 souls for going there, and then you roll dice, and then however many successes you get extra. But now you've maybe only ever gotten 2 per round.
Sitting and looking at the board and the way that the round structure takes place, it looks to me like I'm never gonna get around the board to get all of the resources, to get back around the board to get all of the equipment and monsters I need to fight.
Yeah.
It feels like nothing I do is going to be good enough.
And the equipment that you purchase could be 1 soul, or it could be 7 souls.
Or 9.
I mean,
there was a point where he had gotten, 2 of the cheaper soul costing equipments that were out there, and everything else that came out was there was one that was worth 3, and then the rest were 5, 6, 7, 9.
Yeah.
And that's impossible for me to get because, as we stated, souls are extremely difficult to come by unless you go to this one space,
Right.
and you're still dependent on rolls.
So there's a lot that I think maybe could be tweaked to make this faster play and maybe just more enjoyable, because there's so many systems upon systems upon systems that make this a very long game, and even the combat that interrupts gameplay when the monsters come out or when you go to a place with a monster. Now no one else does anything else. You are the one fighting this monster, and everyone has to wait 10 minutes or so until you finish.
And by the time it gets back to where I'm able to take my action with my little guy, I'm like, I forgot why I'm sitting here.
Yeah. So the good things about this game, it's got a lot of good ideas. It's got some cool art to it. I know it's not in its final form as far as what we're looking at. I know it's the prototype for now. So there's going to be some good development on it. There's a lot of great ideas. There's a lot of
Definitely.
cool concepts.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a really cool game in here. And I will mention, in the rulebook, it offers 4 different ways to play the game, instead of the way that I basically just described to you. There's a cooperative mode where you do the game, but instead of fighting each other, you fight a rank 7 monster. There's a battle mode where you basically ignore the adventure concept and don't use the board at all, and just essentially buy and draft items and cards and then build up a character that way very quickly and then just fight. And then there's just like the drafting plus just going out cooperatively to just defeat every monster in the deck. And so like there's different ways you could play this game, but I'm like, I don't know why all these different ways are in here and not just find the best way to play it and make that. So I don't know. I don't know if it's better because it has different ways or options, or if it really could just use some cooking time to say, like, let's try to combine the best ways and simplify this a little bit more so it's a faster play or it's more enjoyable in combat. I don't know, because right now it'll be really difficult to get to the table with the teach involved and the length of time and commitment to play a worker placement-ized D&D replica.
I really like the idea. I do. I really like the idea. I think it's got everything that I hated about D&D in it. And maybe that's why it can't quite win me over, you know?
It has like all the mechanisms
all the
of D&D,
difficult stuff,
but not the storytelling and role-playing. If that makes sense.
And you know, if that's your thing, that's your thing. Like if you like numbers and stuff, absolutely.
Yeah, and dice rolls.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. But I have dyscalculia. I have ADHD. My brain just can't. It can't.
Yeah. So something like this, a little too much. And
yeah, it's a little overwhelming on me.
For me, it's got a huge investment required where there's so much randomness as well, and so little theme. I mean, it's your basic fantasy RPG. You've got goblins and chimeras and monsters, and like, okay, I get it, but there's nothing sucking me in to want to see what happens, or
the components are cool. Yeah. I like the little minis. They're neat.
Mm-hmm. So
they're really cute.
There's some definite wins in this box. There's some definite good components and qualities and ideas going on here. I just felt like it might need
a little bit of tweaking.
Something tweaked to simplify all the different mechanisms.
Take it easy
systems,
on us.
And it would be better. But again, this is just a prototype. This is our early look, early access to a game that is currently funding on Kickstarter. So as they are making changes, I'm sure all of this might end up being completely different by the time you play it.
Could be
or
absolutely
have in your
irrelevant,
hands.
Yeah.
So depending on how that plays out, we might come back in a year or two after it's got its final production and maybe some tweaks and do a follow-up review on this one. So, But for now, this has been our take on our prototype look at early access Soulshards Grand Tourney, the board game. So thanks for watching this review. I've been Jared.
I'm Holly.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.